Okay, good morning, everyone. Greetings. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. You made it. It is Friday. It is the 20th of May, 2022, and this is the Catalyst Astrology Report. We're going to be looking at primarily at the week following here, Friday the 20th. The sun comes into Gemini today. So to all of you Gemini sun people, happy birthday. This is definitely your month. So welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to stop by and check out Catalyst Energies. And special shout out to the Starseed Fellowship. We did not get a chance to meet this week. It just felt so overwhelming in a lot of ways. You know, we are all processing an incredible amount of information. We are really purging a lot out of our systems right now. So I want to get into a little bit of that today. Of course, as you see in front of us is our current, star, at least one version of our star or our sun. So we're going to talk about some space weather today. We're going to talk about solar weather, the flaring that's been happening, and the Schumann resonance, because there's still, there's conversation that happens in the various platforms that at least I provide through Catalyst Energies. We have a private Telegram channel for the Starseed Fellowship in the Catalyst Classroom, and there's also the public Telegram channel as well in terms of social media, and obviously what I'm posting here to these platforms. But trying to track what is happening, find some measure of rhythm, right, or consistency is, I think, really important. So I'm gonna go back over some things, maybe not draw some conclusions as much as make connections to certain data points that seem to show an alignment or a correlation, so that we can understand that we are not separate from everything that is happening around us as well as within us. And we're getting to this point now where I've started to come to the realization that as we are converging in terms of these timelines, right, that we are converging into this kind of singular awakening moment for humanity on planet Earth, and where it leads is truly up to us. But we are approaching this moment, and it does feel, at least to me, and you can share your experiences either in the chat or in the comment section, wherever you're watching this, what's going on for you. But it does feel like that the closer we get, or the further away that we get from a truly strictly third density reality, and as we are making our way through crossing the threshold into new density, into a different dimension of being entirely, it does appear that the experiences of the material and the energetic / spiritual are really coming together to be one and the same. This is part of the convergence. This is part of working with the duality as a means of creating something more than what it started with. So we're going to talk about these themes today too with the astrology. So we're coming into not only this Mercury Cazimi tomorrow, right, which is where Mercury and the Sun are in a conjunction in relation to our viewpoint of both of those things on this planet. We also have the Sun coming into Gemini, and this Cazimi, this conjunction, is at 0 degrees Gemini. This is the home territory of Mercury. So even though it's in its retrograde, there is something profoundly translucent and powerful with this Cazimi. So, light bulb moments, but truly within ourselves, more than anything else, especially with the Mercury retrograde. We're going over territory that Mercury's already been, and will come back as well. But this is the time where it meets the Sun in conjunction. So the light kind of coming through the lens that is turned inwards into our own inner space, I think, is where we're getting probably the most benefit from this Cazimi. But there's so many transits that are part of this last quarter of the lunar cycle that started with a solar eclipse in Taurus. So we are still, still coming off of the eclipse in Scorpio, the lunar eclipse that was on the 15th to the 16th of May. And, it's not like, we know with any full moon, it's not as if we reach this culmination point and it's all over right away. It's something that we as as material beings experience throughout the course of the moon's transits, right? We get to this culmination point with the full moon, and we have full illumination, reflection, an ability to really see the fullness of that which is normally hidden or embedded within our feeling-based experience. So we already know that we would be with this full moon that had a sun conjunct Algol, something we talked extensively about, that I presented extensively about on the first Catalyst classroom, about Algol, the mythology of Medusa, the Pleiadian element of this. But oh wow! I thought that was thunder for a minute. Sorry, guys. It was incredibly distracting because there is incredible weather that is transpiring, at least here on the East Coast of the United States. Some intense heat wave and a lot of weather that is unfolding. So. And I thought that was thunder out there. So, and it's not. It's just an appliance that's running. So. It does appear, though, that we these experiences that we normally are going to have with a full moon anyway are taking some time to, adjust within ourselves, right? And so if you're experiencing a lot of symptoms, especially yesterday, there was an amplification of the Schumann that was sustained. And we're going to look at how the Schumann seems to be consistently and very rhythmically amplifying on a schedule. And there appears to be correlations with the flaring of these sunspots and magnetic filaments of our sun, even though it hasn't been strong enough to push any weather towards us, right? No coronal mass ejections, no plasma, even though there is plenty of sunspots and there are plenty of there's plenty of sunspots and there are plenty of opportunities for flaring to happen. It's not really reaching us. We have this coronal hole that is now about to turn out of view, but that means that the solar wind coming from it is intensifying, and you can actually look at the telemetry of that. And even though it's been fairly calm and stable, we are being bombarded with higher solar wind speeds and density. So, and of course, there was a very large earthquake that corresponds to these coronal holes. There was almost a 7-point earthquake near Antarctica this week as well. So there are things that are predictable, that are based on observation and consistent observation of these things being connected. And I think that there's something to be said too for the solar weather, as well as the solar weather in this way, as well as what the Schumann is doing. It just feels like that it's been a consistent up-leveling that is preparing us for something even more substantial, right? Like I said, the sun is coming into solar maximum, and there are tons of sunspots, magnetic filaments. We're going to look at a short little animation of what this looks like, but this is what we are doing right now coming off of this eclipse, and which will be very present throughout the rest of the summer into the fall, as this eclipse season continues, is there's a lot of purging that's happening. And the physical experience and the emotional experience, which, are very connected to the axis of Taurus and Scorpio. Taurus being our sensations in the physical and material, and Scorpio being our physical, our feels, our emotional feels in the spirit, in our emotions, in our inner landscape. And so both of those things, as part of the whole eclipse cycle, are very, very active. So if you are having these, people are talking about migraines. I got this incredible burn right after the eclipse, this sunburn that really forced a lot of things up and out, right? Activated the immune system, activated cleanup, right? Damage control in terms of a physical way. But what it seems like is that we are still purging, and it's a really big one. And so to be easy on yourself, to support your body as it's going through not only physical detox and purging, but it's all the same now. Cosmic, material, it's all one and the same at this point. And so to continue to try to keep them separate actually goes kind of flies in the face of the reading we had for the Starseed ministry. The spiritual and the physical are out of balance, and there is a healing component that is part of this process that I think we really can just continue to pay attention to. So we are going to come into the last quarter of our lunar cycle. That means we have a third quarter moon squaring the sun. It'll be a Pisces moon squaring a Gemini sun. And so there will be a moment of pause maybe and reflection on what it means to be open and to be ready to receive information, data, light, right, just from the sun in general and the sun in Gemini, or not even but also in cross purposes to an inner landscape that is really drawing our attention to a need to take care of our emotional state, our connection to the astral, the connection to the spirit, and to be very realistic about what it means to be fully immersed in the collective at a social level, at a spiritual level, cosmic level, whatever. It's all the same when you get into the Pisces realm, and the moon in Pisces squaring the sun is going to be that crisis in consciousness in terms of, where is our consciousness? What is it focused on? And again, we're about to have this new moon in Gemini here on the 30th of May. And so this report's really going to move all the way up to that point. There's so many things happening. Mars is coming into Aries. Venus is going to come into Taurus. She's going to be in a square to Pluto, sextile to Saturn, right? This is a lot of Andromeda Galaxy Starseed activations as well. So if you know you have Andromeda Galaxy in particular, know that towards the end of next week, it's going to get, something that's very palpable in the sensations, right? What Venus ruling the body, embodiment, a sense of a sensitivity to the world around us. So we'll get into that as well. So I'm going to check in with the stream and make sure it is going well, and, that people, that it's just healthy. It seems like it's doing okay. As far as I can tell. But let's get into, here's our sun, but let's get into a little bit of solar weather here and space weather so that we can kind of ground ourselves into what is happening in terms of the cosmos, because we are inseparable from that at this point. So the first thing I want to share is the Schumann resonance, which we know yesterday, as we can see here, had this amplitude, right? Had this amplification that was more sustained. And what I have noticed is that there has been a consistent rhythm and timing of these amplified Schumann resonance experiences. And they're usually roughly, now what we're looking at is Russian time, because this is the graph from Tomsk University. And there seems to be a consistent anywhere from 12 to 1400 military time in Russia, where there seems to be a spike. And this was the case yesterday as well. And then there was another one about 2200 as well. And even today, there seems to be some activation kind of in this window, right, between 12 and 20 military time in Russia. So it's consistent. It's reaching basically the same threshold as roughly 40 to 50 on the scale, as you're going to see when I show you other scales. But there's rhythm here. There's consistency, like a heartbeat, right? That we can kind of see that there is something that is happening along a sequence, right? And what we know, an oscillation or a wave function in and of itself is inseparable from the concept or the experience of rhythm. And rhythm is really what establishes the generation of actual energy itself, or the amplification of energy, or the frequency changing, right, is based on the speed at which these wavelengths or this rhythm is happening. And so you can make that reference to any number of things where rhythm is relevant. So the faster the rhythm, you may find that there is a higher frequency, higher energy, higher pitch, right? Same thing with music, same thing with dancing, same thing with anything that has rhythm. It's in the consistency of the rhythm. And I feel like that this is what we're getting from the earth in terms of the Schumann, okay? It's consistent. Does that mean it's natural or unnatural? I don't know. But I do feel, but what I am observing is a consistent pattern along these lines of timing where there are these large spikes. So I want to take a moment to go into the Wayback Machine here, and just remind ourselves of what has been going on so far in here in May, because I think it's going to be really important to consider this moving forward if we're going to be talking about the Schumann resonance. So what we're looking at here is a different website, still looking at the Schumann, and we're looking at what has transpired in May so far. So you see that there is a really large amplification and a sustained amplification by all of the white that you see here. So there is not, and you can see it's actually shown in this graph as well. Let me see if I can scroll down a little. There we go. And so you see the average here, the red line, and then you see this actual amplitude that's happening right now, May 2022, and you see roughly around, if you look at the date, right after the 5th, there was a massive amplitude spike that was fairly sustained. So what was happening on the 5th? Well, the 5th of May was astrological Beltane. It is 15 degrees Taurus. The sun is at 15 degrees Taurus. It is the crucifixion of the seed. The seed breaks open and releases the germ that is then germinating, that is pushing up from the seed to the light at the surface, right? It represents the individual subjective ego consciousness surrendering itself for the sake of a growing consciousness that is represented by Gemini. And that only happens when the seed is implanted into the medium of growth, which is Taurus, right? And so we see after the 5th, a really large sustained spike. It seems like that there is a lot of support in some ways in this magnetic field getting very loud for the journey of this little tiny sprout pushing its way up. And we talked about this at the time. What else happened on the 5th of May? Well, that was the sun, not only at Beltane, it was conjunct Uranus at 14 to 15 degrees Taurus as well, right? This is where you face the storm, so to speak, and you pop your collar, put your hat on, put your hood up, and you face it. And this is where adversity of circumstances really reveal the character. And again, there was a big spike in amplitude. So it's not nearly as much as that was happening, but it's as if what was happening then was the release of the seed, right? The seed releasing and surrendering itself, the individual subjective consciousness or ego in some ways. Now, this is very difficult to wrap our heads around right now because we have Aries, we have Venus in Aries, we have Jupiter in Aries, we have Chiron in Aries, and we are soon to have Mars come into Aries, okay? So talk about all of that self-identified ego consciousness, potency, desire, spark of life, being representative of the seed itself. And we know that on some level, we're all going through a process where collectively, the collective consciousness, the collective third eye opening, really supporting not just our own individual development, but something way more. And when the sun reaches that 0 degrees Gemini, that is the sprout popping out of the soil, right? Finally reaching the light. And what do we have but Mercury that is going to be turning that lens inward towards this growing germ, right? This whole new life, this whole new consciousness bursting forward, and the lens being so sharp and the lens being so clear and turned inward. It's just going to show all of the potential of what this can be for each of us and collectively. Now, remember, Mercury is retrograde back. So I just wanted to give some context about what's been happening moving into this moment, and the fact that there has been still a lot of activity around the Schumann, but also relating it back to previous astrological things, seasonal things, with the actual sun itself, and also with the Schumann resonance. So let's see here. There we go. So what I'm going to do now, I want to just show a couple things. So we already looked at the coronal hole that from the sun, and we're in the midst of that coronal hole stream. And so what we'll find here, if you want to just get another look, there is that that sunspot complex that is facing directly at us that looks gnarly, right? It's got really complex magnetism. It is flaring. There is magnetic filaments that are also flaring. If we look at this little animation, this is something that somebody caught on their camera. So this is the same sunspot group, but it is actually in motion. You see this magnetic filament kind of snaking around, very active, very strong potential for X-class flares. Now, it has been flaring. Absolutely. There have been M-class flares that you will see if we go into that particular graph here. You can see every time this spikes here, this is a solar flare coming off the sun. So starting on the 15th, Sunday, there was a flare. And then we get to midnight on, then we get into the 16th, where we have the solar or the lunar eclipse, and then we go through Monday, and then there's a flare, right? There's actually two flares, and then we get to Tuesday, and there's some activity, and then we get to yesterday or Wednesday, and then there's another flare, and then we get to yesterday, and look at this flare, flare, flare. And what did we see on the Schumann yesterday? Just to remind ourselves, look, there is sustained amplification, back to back to back M-class flares, okay? It's the sun is the Schumann and the planet is, the Schumann is the expression of how the Earth, I feel, is responding every time the sun has any kind of flaring, right? Because the next one that releases coronal mass ejection or any kind of plasma is going to be very impactful. And we want to be aligned with the strength and amplitude of the Earth's field within ourselves. And so, again, there's a lot of inflammation, there's a lot of purging, there's a lot of weird symptoms, migraines, headaches, pain in the body. This is a purging that's coming out of this eclipse. Now, the full moon in itself is a purging, right? What are you releasing? Especially in Scorpio, especially late Scorpio, especially with the sun in conjunction with Algol or the head of Medusa, right? We know that there is deep toxicity that is being released in order to adjust to an equilibrium of nature. So that itself is intense. The fact that it was eclipsed, this shows that the Earth itself is the shadow that is cast on otherwise a full reflection of this inner experience. And so it's the barrier of our own materiality that is causing the swelling, as we talked about at the Starseed Ministry on Wednesday. So it's still very much active. And to consider that this is going to be part of the eclipse cycle for the next 6 months, okay? I just did a cultivation reading yesterday, and that it's a reverberation that continues to come around, and there are continued conversations with retrograde Pluto during this time. So you can see the connection, and to be easy, support your body in its process. Don't try to shut it down and try to, sometimes I feel like, and I do this too all the time, like we really want an answer. We really want to, rationalize it. We really want a logical explanation. We tend to really overthink it. And in fact, there is some aspects of this week's astrology that is going to really assist us in letting go of the rational, to be more holistic, intuitive, non-rational experience of what is going on. Otherwise, it may be more than the rational, logical mind can handle. Remember, Mercury is in retrograde. It's going to come back into Taurus, right? This is back into the sensation, back into the physical material world of value and worth, not in the realm of the mind, not in the realm of ideas. So it's okay that, we want these answers, but we also have to give ourselves space to not try to make sense of everything and to allow these processes to unfold. So let's see. We saw the flare. We saw the X-ray. Just to give some, we see that the telemetry here of the solar wind currently is pretty stable, it's dense, it's getting faster, and of course you can see the KP index. It hasn't come out of green yet. I mean, the only time it really did was the last coronal hole stream, and I feel like there was a really small CME that came our way and it kind of like blipped. So we know that the field is still very strong, right? And I think this is a function of these consistent rhythmic amplifications of the Schumann that are allowing us to align with it. And so then it becomes a positive kind of feedback loop between us and life and the planet and the sun, right? It's always about the sun for us. So let's see here. We're gonna move on to, I believe, the chart now for this process. So we are on the 20th. So how are people doing? Let us know how you're feeling. And if you are having these symptoms, if you are having crazy dreams, right? If sleep is disrupted, like whatever it is, just know that this is part of this purging, right? Again, it's about creating the space in which these events and the revelation can be received. And we are truly entering a new dimension, right? This is part of this process. But the experience of it, of the physical, is something that is actually quite new to the human experience, right? We're going to make this transition in the physical body. That is the whole point of this, right? We're not going to all have to exit or leave the physical nature behind in order to make the transition in density, right? It is all coming with us, which means we have to kind of go through the physical process also of what that feels like, what that experience is. And that's down to our bodies, our health, our physical resources, our financial assets, right? Anything of value and worth, our relationships, our ancestry, our DNA, right? All of these things are part of Taurus and the second house in general, which is truly the agent of this entire eclipse cycle. So as we're finishing out during this week, just remember too that a lot of this is going to stretch out for months, and not to worry you or to give you a sense of like, oh shit, this is going to be really intense. It's really going to be intense. It's going to be an intense summer with Pluto as the agent of this eclipse, right? And the Pleiadian nature, and the fact that we're about to come into a new moon in Gemini where, it's time to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak. And there is you accept the decision and the action that you're taking based on it's not about whether you're going to fail or not. You accept that failure is very much part of taking the nosedive. And we're going to talk a lot about this new moon at the next Catalyst Classroom leading up to it. Plus, Gemini, the new moon astrology forecast will be for the Gemini signs this coming month. So keep an eye on that as well. So this is the 20th of May. You can see our chart here. Now the moon, at this point, this is early this morning. This looks like 2:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We know that the moon is about to meet here with Pluto. So oftentimes when the moon and Pluto meet, just in general, this is like a valve opening, right? A deep or some means of whatever is deeply embedded. And with Pluto retrograde, it's been exposed now in a lot of ways. And now it's being exposed and it's being aggravated. Things are being eliminated. And it's very much within what has already been exposed in a lot of ways. So when the moon meets Pluto, just in general, this is an outlet for these otherwise very deep, repressed types of emotions, experiences, soul transformational power here. So it's very accessible, and this was overnight. So again, the dream state may have brought this out for you, or it just have allowed you to really read between the lines in a way that you hadn't been able to yet. In the feels, right? Especially in the feels and in the establishment and our feeling of establishment, institution, the economy, the government, all of these Capricornian types of representations. So anything that is the unfolding of the material fractal of reality is Capricorn. So I suspect that today, and many people have already reported, and I can report on my own too, that a lot of the physical discomfort of the last week, especially, and certainly the last couple of days, is starting to dissipate. And I feel like this moon meeting Capricorn late last night, early this morning, really assisted with that, right? I gave it an outlet when otherwise the eclipsed Scorpio moon had distortion and shadow, and may have led to some more extreme ways of allowing this flow to happen. So you may have subconsciously engaged in things. There may have been things that have been in the works for a long time that finally reached to fruition at this point. There's a lot of ways, but I think that it was a valve in some ways that allowed release, or at least access to what otherwise is deeply embedded in our subconscious, or deeply embedded in the soul, really. You know, Pluto is truly, other than Eris, right? Eris, that is the goddess of discord. Pluto truly is kind of like the last frontier for us. So when we move past this, though, today, so this is the 20th, today's Friday the 20th, the sun is in the last degrees of Taurus, coming into Gemini, and the moon is still, at this time, the moon is still in Capricorn. And what happens is that they come into a trine together at the very last degree, actually, of Capricorn and Taurus. So I want to share that with you because it's an interesting set of Sabian symbols here. Oh yeah, 29 degrees, 49 minutes down to it right here. So we're going to find a trine. This was this morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So what we see at this very last degree is the sun and the moon just past Pluto in a trine, an earth trine. So the last degree of Taurus, 30 degrees Taurus, the Sabian symbol is a peacock strutting around on the terrace of this very old castle. And the peacock is very Venusian, right? It is the bird of Venus in a lot of ways. It represents Venus. Now, peacocks the males are incredibly colorful, right? I mean, they are the ones with the massive display. And if you've ever heard peacocks, they have a very distinct call for each other. They do roost in trees, but they primarily move around on the ground. They're not often flying, but they will fly, kind of like turkeys, right? They will fly to get into these higher areas to sleep, but they, for the most part, walk around, their feet on the ground. This is important. We're talking about Taurus and Venus. We're not talking about Libra and flying, but still a bird, still representing the feather, and still a connection to spirit when you talk about feathers. And also a Promethean type of spirit. Venus actually has, in my feeling as well, has its own duality of the feminine, which is Aphrodite, or the goddess of love, and then there's this Prometheus aspect of it too that is often attributed to Venus, the planet Venus. Now, Prometheus also tends to be associated with Uranus as this trickster element, or bringing consciousness to humanity. Uranus representing the collective consciousness, bringing fire to humanity. Uranus ruling Aquarius, the thunderbolt, or the energy itself. But I think that I like the duality of Venus even in this context of Prometheus and Aphrodite, because it shows that everything in its way has its own duality to transmute and to creatively come together with. So you have this peacock that's strutting around, and the idea at the very last degree of Taurus is that everything that is consummating at this moment with this peacock, this individual image strutting around on this old castle, is, yes, it's all coming together, but it's inseparable from everything you came from, right? It is not in a vacuum. And what's interesting is that the moon at the very last degree of Capricorn is, in fact, the representation is the cabal, right? It is a group of executive people that are meeting in secret to a secret meeting of men responsible for executive decisions in world affairs, right? I mean, you can attribute this to any number of actual established meetings, right? You got Davos, you got the World Economic Forum, you got the Bilderbergs, right? You got Bohemian Grove and what that is. That's more ritualistic. This seems more like, and we also have the World Health Organization is doing whatever the hell they're attempting to do right now. So you have this secret meeting, or you have this idea of the power to assume responsibility for crucial choices. So these two coming together in a trine, the moon and the sun in a earth trine, is really establishing some consummation, or this individual efforts that are coming to fruition that are absolutely stabilized by an feeling of responsibility, assuming responsibility, and making these decisions, right? So this is definitely happening on some sort of larger global scale. But what does this mean for each of us individually, esoterically? Again, that we are reaching a point of consummation, and it is in this identification in this moment with the sun that we feel the power to assume responsibility for whatever crucial choices have to do, with us and the establishment. So this has, a lot to do with where Capricorn is in your chart, right? And so understanding that is going to give, shine some light on the areas that this is most likely going to express itself. So for Aquarius rising, for instance, like myself, this is all in my 12th house. I mean, these are Akashic, karmic types of aspects coming together that are not necessarily going to even show themselves in the world around me in a way that I can access. But what it is doing in terms of Capricorn, but what it is doing is the identification in terms of the 4th house, right? Of home and family, where you belong, where your loyalties lie, the sense of core stability, identifying with that, stabilizing that in the face of these crucial choices arrived at in terms of the karmic conversation that this is on multiple levels, right? When you're talking about the 12th house, you're talking about the morphogenetic field that crosses all ancestral lineage, right? You're talking about your own Akashic record, so your past lives, multidimensional experiences, all of it, right? And many Aquarius rising people are going through this because Capricorn is their 12th house, and it's preparing for the, the transition into the age of Aquarius. And if you're an Aquarius rising person, or just a strong Aquarius, it's going to be very related to who you are and how you identify yourself. So these types of things are very much setting the tone for moving forward. So then the moon moves into Aquarius, speaking of which, and it right away comes into a trine with the Mercury retrograde and has a sextile to Jupiter today. So if we were to... Well, first we'll do this. Move forward. So Jupiter is in Aries. What is going to be happening? So Mars is going to move into Aries this week. It's going to meet Jupiter right before the new moon. So at our balsamic moon, Mars and Jupiter are going to be conjunct. Wow, this is some really incredible, bold, self-starting, enterprising action. We'll get to that. That's going to be happening. So in the meantime, though, the moon comes into Aquarius and is in a sextile with Mercury. And it is in a sextile down here, Mercury in Gemini, and also in a sextile with, a trine, an air trine, and then is in a sextile with Jupiter over here in Aries, which means that Mercury and Jupiter will also be in a sextile. So you can see this relationship happening here that looks like the top of a kite. So, oh, I'm so sorry. There we go. You can see it right here. Moon, sextile Jupiter. Jupiter, sextile, Mercury retrograde, 60-degree angle, right? Harmonious, but requires activation or participation, right? In order to gather the harmony or the lessons learned from, this moment. And you also see that the moon is in a direct air trine to this Mercury retrograde in Gemini. So the second degree of Aquarius is interesting. It's an unexpected thunderstorm. So we are definitely expecting thunderstorms here on the East Coast, but what it also suggests is in Aquarius, for as much as it represents the idealized, spiritualized collective, it also is in contrast represents the need to develop the inner security, which will enable you to meet an unexpected crisis, right? It's one thing to identify with this idealized version. It's another to actually be feet on the ground and be able to establish your own inner security when nature essentially takes everything away that you as a society or as a group or a community have built together. So there's always an unexpected element of chaos. That's the whole point of it. And Uranus is a big part of the story throughout the week. So it's in this sextile, it's in this trine to Mercury that is showing us where we can stabilize in our mind, where we can make the best of the Jupiter as the representative of the objective consciousness, right? Kind of being like a comedian or some sort of advocate for the mirror, right? To use, especially to use humor. I mean, Jupiter and Sagittarius in particular, this is, comedy is a big part of that. And so for Jupiter to be at the second degree of Aries, also in contrast, is like, hey, look, it's about identifying with the humor, being the witness, being able to have an objective perspective on the whole, your whole role in all of this, and to meet it with some humor. And in that, it's going to, I think, really make a difference in terms of an unexpected storm within ourselves, right? The moon is our inner experience, our interpersonal experience. So something comes up and we have to just keep a sense of humor about it. And in fact, Mercury in its retrograde in a trine to the moon, again, is a stabilization of our own inner experience of this unexpected storm, this unexpected crisis, whatever it is. It's in our willingness to see this as a blessing, right? And that's going to be difficult, but this is part of the Mercury retrograde, is to go back deeper into what these things represent. And so this is happening, like I said, this is happening now, right? This is what we're looking at, right? 10:30 a.m. And so whatever that feels like for you, whatever it is that's unexpected, or just the reminder to develop your own inner security to meet these unexpected crises, this is the support network right here. And in fact, Mercury and Jupiter throughout today are going to, or in tomorrow, are going to be in an exact sextile with each other at these positions. So it's the moon that kind of is connecting them in this moment for us individually, right? So whatever the sextile is for the two of them is probably going to be more impactful. And it's in this moment here that it's just like, okay, right? This is how it feels to have inner security when shit that we don't plan for happens. So makes me a little nervous for my own weekend, but it is what it is, and I trust that I'm exactly where I need to be, and I've made choices that would put me in certain places for a reason, and if I'm not supposed to be there, I assure you I will not be there, and my guidance system will make sure of that. So by the end of today, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have the sun come into Gemini, 0 degrees Gemini. So when we move into tomorrow, the 21st, this is where we have the Cazimi. So this is still building, that's not what I want. This is still building, obviously, but is leading to this moment here where we get to have that translucent mind as we gaze upon our own inner space. So that's the 20th. Let's look at the 21st. Oh my. and the transit. So we have our moon still in Aquarius, which in some ways is really, allowing us to have a sense of detachment, and to maybe be a little aloof in some ways, to see our emotions as something that we can transmute as opposed to being fully propelled by them, pushed around by them, having them be so intense, either in our feelings or in our sensations inside our body, that we can't even really be an objective witness. Now with the moon in Aquarius this weekend, I feel like we're going to get a sense of that, just kind of separate ourselves from the intensity of all and be like, okay, I see now and I experience now the power moving through me as opposed to identifying strictly with it, which is where a lot of pain comes from, which is where a lot of emotional pain, physical pain, discomfort, right? Doubt, all of those things. So when we come into the 21st, we are going to have a moon sextile Chiron and square Uranus. Speaking of Uranus, so Chiron now has moved into the 15th to 16th degree of Aries now. So this is moving now into the second half of Aries as well. So we are moving from desire to potency. And this degree of Aries is very interesting because it suggests what it represents is an attunement to invisible forces. This is what I was speaking about earlier in terms of, finding a non-rational way, holistic way to approach life. It's an invitation in a lot of ways. A non-rational, intuitive, holistic approach to life, right? And it's really when the body energy is weakened, and oftentimes when we do this intentionally, it comes from fasting, it comes from sensory deprivation, or any number of other types of practices where the body energy is weakened to the point where it becomes easier to perceive these nature spirits, right? And that's the Sabian symbol, the nature spirit seen at work in the light of the sunset. And we know that at sunrise and sunset, this is where the energy changes, where it's more it's easier. It's easier for us to gain access to the astral, or to be able to see beyond just the strict material aspect of life. So when it becomes easier to perceive these and give them forms that symbolize the character of their activity. So either nature spirits or some other way that our mind gives a form to these things. It's the idea here, though, to open the mind to the possibility that you could approach life in a non-rational, holistic, and intuitive manner. So keep in mind, this is Chiron. So every time we want to maybe open our mind to this possibility where we are not necessarily overthinking everything, Sun in Gemini, boy, oh boy, it's not going to be easy, is it? Right? And we are truly going to be identified with polarization, with ideas, expression, discovery, data, information, whatever it is going to be right on the surface, in our focus, expressing ourselves through this way. And so to consider that maybe we could identify a non-rational, intuitive means of, approaching life. The Chiron every time is going to be like, no, right? You better be on it, right? Your mind better be here. And this is where the third quarter moon is really going to come into play, because a moon in Pisces is the epitome of non-rational, intuitive, holistic experience. A moon in Pisces, I mean, that is all that is. And when we do that, we allow for a submersion, right? Complete dissolution into all that there is. And there will be triggers along the way. So the first of them is this moon in Aquarius is going to be in a sextile with Chiron, as you see here, and at the very same time is going to be in a square with Uranus in Taurus. Now, Uranus has moved into the next degree of Taurus too. There's this 15 to 16 degree mark as well. And truly, the past knowledge is not working anymore. And Uranus, no big deal, right? Uranus is like, I'm never looking back at the past necessarily. I'm always, it's all about the collective consciousness evolving. And so evolution does not often rely on what has already happened other than to build upon it. And so Uranus here is, waking us up to the fact that there is nothing traditional that we have left that is really going to interest us anymore in this awakening process. It is time to start moving ahead with what is new. And Pluto in Capricorn, I mean, how much more obvious does it get in terms of like it all down to the foundation is being destroyed at that level. So the moon at 16 degrees Aquarius is really about managing our energy, managing large groups of energy. And at the moon, it's going to be our own ability to manage the collective energy within ourselves. Sextile to Chiron, if we get pulled back into old stories, right? And same thing with the square to Uranus. We get pulled back into old stories of who we've been. If we do not allow for that part of our mind to like settle so that we can, be attuned to something much more subtle, but much more magical and much more natural, then we're going to, we're going to kind of get stuck again in a feedback loop. And we're not going to be able to really manage ourselves in the face of anything at all. And in fact, it's this square to Uranus at the very same time that is going to bring this out. And so, how do we manage something that we don't even know is coming? Well, I would say that being able to tap into non-rational, intuitive, holistic approaches to reality is going to help not only pull us out of old stories of being a victim, being a savior, the wounded healer, and the shame and guilt for being ourselves, but it's also going to help us move past old knowledge and actually have us get excited about what's coming forward, right? A moon in Aquarius, I mean, it is as intense as the most intense person in the collective, right? And so that's going to be, I think, a real challenge tomorrow, but it's also a challenge that we should really, really accept. And so if you're trying to rationalize a lot of what's happening right now within yourself, in your own spirit, trying to find why it's happening, and believe me, I'm often doing this, but I ain't got a lick of Gemini in my chart. So, everybody does because it's a house cusp somewhere, which is my, fourth into my fifth house cusp. So, but I don't have anything. I don't have anything that's actually there in my natal chart. And so, it's not really too difficult for me to get into the big picture. But at the same time, if you're looking for answers, you'll find it by being able to internally manage this collective energy, this collective consciousness within you. I think that's really where we're going to find a lot of success, and let go of the same old playbook, right? Uranus is like, enough. There is nothing left in this old dusty manual, and they keep trying to, we see that. They're going to roll out the next scam. They're rolling out the next blah, 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 blah. Uranus is past it, right? So, and it's failing to interest us. How many people have just started just becoming less and less interested in the same stuff you've been listening to, or the same over and over and over, and you're finding out it's just like it's not relevant anymore. So this is part of tomorrow's experience, I would say. So let's see here. We are moving up towards this third quarter moon. Third quarter moon. So the Mercury conjuncts the sun tomorrow as well in that Cazimi at 0 degrees. We've talked about this many times. It's really just, the consciousness translucent in a way that we have full range of our own inner consciousness, right? The collective unconscious for ourselves and how it's reflected in ourselves through this incredible light energy. And one thing I did talk about, I think a couple weeks ago, was that if there was ever going to be a time where a flare was going to have a huge impact on awakening people, it would be at this Cazimi, right? While Mercury is still retrograde, right? So that we all take it in within our own self. So I wouldn't be surprised, and considering all the other things lining up with the sun right now, it is definitely ready to release some massive flaring potentially. the moon is going to sextile Venus as well. Venus in coming into the last decan of Aries, and is going to Venus T-square to her own nodal axis. So let's look at that actually. So 22 to 23 Aquarius, 22 to 23 degrees Aries. Now this is an Andromedan starseed activation. Where am I here? 22 degrees of Aries. This is a starseed activation for Andromeda constellation, right? These are the beings that Alex Collier has been in contact with and is part of his soul group. So that is great information if you have Andromedan constellation starseed markings, because they represent, you know, the basic traits of those star seeds as well. So the sextile here, 23 degrees of Aquarius in a sextile to Venus in Aries. You know, there is this inner fulfillment, and not even fulfillment, this sense of like the full fertilization, right? The fact that like, and the potential to be fulfilled, I think, is really where Venus in Aries represents, right? That all of the potential for who we could be is already embedded within us, right? Because we are spiritual beings having this material experience. So within the body, and if Venus is anything, it definitely represents the body and embodiment and our sensations and our sensitivity to this spark of life. And the sextile to the moon in Aquarius is... it's like when we can really discipline ourselves, again, to be able to hold the collective consciousness. Again, there is something here that we can invest and activate and harmoniously get out of our embodiment of this inner fulfillment, or this ability to be fulfilled, right? 23 degrees Aries. So if we were to, you know, the Sabian symbol of this is a pregnant woman in, you know, a light dress, like a summer dress. You know, it is the maximum experience of potential fulfillment. That is probably the most easily harmonized with when we are able to truly discipline our energy and see every situation as a disciplining or training protocol, right, in Aquarius. Now, what's interesting is that at the very same time, the moon is in a T-square to her own nodal axis. And we know that the nodal axis is, in fact, the soul's trajectory and is a big part of the eclipses, right? Full and new moons along the nodal axis are what causes eclipses. And so this is about the sensation of, or at least with the nodes, the north node especially, you know, certification of a natural worth, of a natural value, something that is inherently valuable because it is, and that we just kind of certify it that way or find a means to identify it as valuable with our own social designation, right? This is the pull of the soul right now, is in this direction. So I think that this is one of those moments where with the moon in Aquarius, we're going to really be like, okay, so how can I actually like discipline myself and like see every opportunity as something, you know, that is training me for this potential fulfillment or potency and the potential to actualize myself and my relationships, all these things with Venus. It's this T-square. You know, I think that is going to be like this moment where we realize at a soul level, it truly is about what is naturally unfolding in terms of where we've been, and recognizing that at some point has been the, you know, the means in which we have been able to transubstantiate is through recognizing the deep value of what is embedded in time, space, right, nature, and cycles. So we've been there, done that, right? The South Node in Scorpio. And now we are heading to somewhere new, somewhere that is about natural fulfillment. And how do we make the best of this? I think this T-square is going to show us where we are out of phase with that, but also is going to give us the conflict that we need to get ourselves in phase with that from a maybe intellectual or certainly a masterful type of energetic or emotional experience, right? That the emotions that have to do with the sensations, right? Taurus and Scorpio are sensations and emotions. The experience at a soul level that we're all being pulled towards is one thing, and how to manage that from our collective intellect and consciousness is really going to come out of this T-square. And it's going to be, an embodied experience of everything we need is already here within us, with Venus in Aries, that I think is going to really take the pressure off in some ways of the moon in Aquarius, of being like either completely cut off in some ways, like totally detached, right? That's the other side of a moon in Aquarius. You can be completely aloof to the fact that even you have emotions, right? And consider that it's all just a training ground, but it's not, right? That's real. And the spark of life is real within us. It's something we can feel in our bodies and in our own sensitivity to the world around us. And that is going to keep us from being completely detached, I think. And when we come into the 22nd, this is where we're going to have our third quarter moon. So the sun is going to be in, as we see here, the sun is in Gemini, right? So we have a mutable square, and the moon coming into Pisces is this moment here of, okay, so do we keep our consciousness open to receive the rewards of spiritual blessing, right? It's like, is our heart going to be open and our awareness going to be open? Are we keeping it open to have it filled in with insight and discovery and exploration and ideas and concepts, right? All of these Gemini things to receive it. And the square with the moon, the Pisces moon at 2 degrees, is like, okay, well, but there's a part of us that needs to remain cautious and hidden and very realistic about what it means to be fully immersed in the astral woo realm, because you leave yourself open and you don't want to just give away all of yourself in this moment either. And so this is happening at, let's see here, 2:45 p.m. on Sunday, Eastern Standard Time. Now, before that happens, what do we see? The moon, if we come back just a little bit, the moon will have been conjunct Saturn. Now, Saturn has moved into a new degree of Aquarius as well. And in fact, this is where Saturn is going to station retrograde next month. And at 25 to 26 degrees of Aquarius. Number one, this is 2 galactic degrees. This is Orion and square to the Pleiades. 26 degrees of Aquarius is the action of measuring the moisture in a battery with a hydrometer. And it's the idea that we use our intellect, our mental efficiency, right? What we have created or built as a result of our technology. We want to be able to measure if there is truly enough moisture for this battery to hold a charge, right? And what's the battery? Well, it's the collective consciousness. And the charge, or the battery, and the moisture in the battery is the Pisces energy, right? So the moon is going to cross over Saturn on Sunday morning, Sunday morning before coming into Pisces, and kind of create kind of a barrier in some ways, emotionally and internally, and be like, hey, by the way, is your battery able to hold the charge? Is it? And Saturn is unyielding in what Saturn does, which is, okay, we got to test the battery now. And that could be your emotional battery, that could be your inner fluids, right? That could be your spirit, that could be your subconscious. Whatever it is, it's going to meet Saturn, and it's going to be kind of like a wet blanket about it and be like, listen, we have to test the battery, because if you can't turn it over, if you can't turn the vehicle over because the battery's not holding a charge, then none of it matters. So that's going to be part of it too. And then the moon comes into Pisces, and at that point we are inseparable from the moisture in the battery. So it's probably a really good thing that we take this moment of this conjunction seriously on Sunday morning, so that we can establish what, the correct amount of moisture, right? And the moisture is Pisces. It is the medium in which the collective consciousness, the spiritual consciousness moves through, right? And we don't, what we are open to versus what we are trying to remain cautious about is going to be, I think, really obvious when the moon meets Saturn. That's just my opinion about it. It'll be obvious on some level of like, okay, you got to stop and make sure all of this is good to go before moving forward. And then in that third quarter square, it's always a personal crisis, right? Crisis in consciousness. What am we conscious of, right? What is the nature of our consciousness when we take how we feel on the inside in square to how we're expressing ourselves on the outside? We don't want to shut ourselves down completely. That's important too, but we also don't want to, be completely devoid of any, spiritual, energetic, emotional, fluidity here. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to, hold the charge, if that makes sense. So what else is happening on this day? So the other thing I want to really bring up for people is to look where Lilith is. Black Moon Lilith is the only thing really in Gemini up until the sun comes in, and it's stationing direct right at 9 to 10 degrees Gemini, which is Aldebaran, which is a Hyades starseed, and it's the degree of our next new moon. So Lilith is deep, right? Lilith is the dark feminine. And so pay attention to maybe some things that are really roiling around there that you don't even recognize are deep pockets of who you are and where you've come from, right? That will find their expression. And just be aware of that as well, because it's already setting the tone for the rest of this week leading up to a new moon. So it's really under the surface, and it has to do with our original blueprint of humanity, taking a nosedive in some ways, Lilith made a decision, and she never went back on it, despite even having an opportunity to return. And there's something very important about that perspective when it comes to, okay, it's time to take the nosedive, mind over matter, right? You are taking the initiative to make a decision, and perhaps there is a decision that's being made on behalf of humanity that is going to find its expression within each of us. So know where Gemini is in your chart so you can have an idea of what area of life this is going to start impacting for you. And let's see, Mars sextile Pluto, and Mercury enters Taurus by the end of this day, right, in its retrograde. And specifically Mars in a sextile to Pluto, as we see here, is that perspective, right? The perspective of Pluto, which is the underlying hidden energetic scaffolding of our established reality, and how it's becoming very transparent. It's being exposed. It's being eliminated. We are feeling it within ourselves, right? We are experiencing it within our own inner space. And the sextile to Mars is very interesting because it's that prism, right? It is the prism that refracts light into all of its different wavelengths, showing that differentiation is also part of this cycle of growth, of evolution. For all of the singular or experience of oneness that you get in Pisces, it's a fleeting moment in the process of creation and in the process of growth. And so it takes a real analytical mind to be able to refract, this singular visible light into its constituent different wavelengths of light and frequencies of light. And so again, perspective about all of these things is so important. And Mars in particular in this sextile here, showing that even with the destruction, even with the elimination, even with all of the Pluto aspects that are happening, it's all still coming from the same source. We'll return back to the same source, and then we'll find a new expression that is shown to us through the prism, right? It is the experience of the light going through the prism that shows us where we can really harmonize and make the most out of. Mars and Pluto are both rulers of Scorpio. So in a sextile together, both of them in a water and an earth sign. I mean, this is really getting at, it's really getting at the essence of what is happening energetically, right? And so we need a mind and a power in order to formulate life processes in their many aspects, right? It's very easy to go through this establishment demolition with Pluto, either inside, outside, whatever, and think that that's the end. And it's the Mars at the very last degrees of Pisces like this. It's just like, no, it comes in, yes, and it breaks apart, but then that's differentiation into all these new perspectives, all of these new trajectories, and Mars is acting, right? Acting on this spiritual experience. So this is important too. It's going to keep us from, our own self breaking apart. It's going to be acting on, the perspective we want to follow, right? It doesn't matter which color of the rainbow that we pick. It's all just a different vibration, and it will have its impact, of course, but it's no different than where it comes from, which is source. We're all coming from that place, okay? So what else is happening? And then Mercury enters Taurus, right? Comes back it's in conjunction with Alcyon. It's the main star in the Pleiades cluster. So we're still in this Pleiadian window for the time being with Mercury retrograde. And of course, where Neptune is still activating this, this window of Pleiadian energy. And so the Pleiadian revival is soon going to end, right? It's soon going to end, but there's still some throwbacks. There's still something here that is bringing our attention back to it so that we don't lose sight of what that represents. Balanced in our balanced equilibrium, right? A balanced heart chakra, an open heart chakra, a command and authority over ourselves and the material. Absolutely. So when we come into this week, there's a lot that's going to be happening. There's a lot of big transits. So Monday is going to be Monday the 23rd. We're going to see more sextiles, right? Pluto or Mercury and Mars will be in a sextile with each other. The sun is going to be in a sextile to Jupiter. So you see this Aries Gemini sextile happening multiple fronts. Venus is going to be in Aries in a sextile to Saturn. This is an Andromedan starseed activation here. Now, and we'll talk about that on Monday when we come into the ministry, just to get an idea of what to expect. This is going to, again, we don't want to drop anything, right? We don't want to drop the ball. And this degree of Aries is very much a potential to drop the ball if you are obsessed by all of the potential and not actually measuring what you're capable of holding. And that's what Saturn in this sextile to Venus is going to be perfect for. So that's happening on the 24th, right? Venus sextile Saturn, and that's when Mars enters Aries. So talk about making sure that we are not going to hold more than we can handle. When Mars comes into Aries, it's on, right? I mean, the warrior is out the gate at that point and acting. So we want to make sure that we are holding that we have the capacity to hold, and that we're making decisions. We're not getting obsessed by the potential over and over and again, but actually being able to pick the gifts that we want to act on and to embody with Venus in particular. And it's going to be the sextile to Saturn that allows us to feel into, okay, well, what is it that we can actually hold? What is it that we can realistically hold, right? Instead of just like getting caught up in the potential all the time. Mercury on the 25th is going to be in another trine with Pluto retrograde. So these two are in retrograde now together, and they come into a trine. Again, here is wise, that mature perspective, the idea that you have to take both oppositions into account to fully understand something. And so this perspective is going to be brought to our inner awareness again as we're going through an even deeper portion of this Pluto cycle now in its retrograde. So that's on, the Wednesday the 25th, while the moon comes into a conjunction with Chiron. So it's already met Mars in Aries, it's met Jupiter in Aries, and then it meets Chiron in Aries at the time of this trine. Mercury and Pluto. So we're going to have firsthand experience emotionally and intuitively with this non-rational intuitive, a holistic approach, right? And how it feels within our old identity or a sense of self or this wounded healer identity, what it feels like, right? And maybe we tap into the master teacher aspect of Chiron as opposed to the wounded healer aspect of Chiron. And we really tap into something that is beyond our rational comprehension, that is the spirit within us. I think that's a really strong potential by mid next week. And then on Friday, we have the Venus squaring Pluto right before she moves into, Taurus. She comes home. This is so nice. But it's also going to be kind of difficult here for just a minute or so with Venus and Pluto, because this is about the music of the spheres, right? Talking about being in attunement with the cosmos. Can we hold that attunement in our sense of, in our relationships, our own bodies, a sense of what's valuable to us, right? Venus, are we really able to be in alignment with the larger cosmic symphony here in square to the very real, the very raw, the very palpable elimination process of Pluto? So that's going to really challenge us by the end of next week. And so we'll be talking about that because we have this whole week leading up to this point, but I want to bring it up because we're getting into the balsamic moon. The moon is coming into Taurus at this point. It's going to cross over the same portion as the new moon solar eclipse. It will not be eclipsed at this point. Well, the moon will not be doing anything. It'll just be a balsamic moon. And we'll get to reconnect to that moment together. And Venus enters Taurus. The moon actually meets Uranus. And again, we get to connect into, this is not working for us anymore, right? The past knowledge is not working for us anymore. We have to find a way intuitively within ourselves to open up to the future of where we're going and a whole new set of principles, new physics in some ways. And then on the 29th, before we get up to this new moon, this is where Mars and Jupiter come into a conjunction at 3 to 4 degrees of Aries. Now, this is really important because what this represents is the polarity within us operating not in a closed loop with the outside world, but with a closed loop with each other, right? The polarity within us is working in a closed loop as it is in a dynamic connection to the world outside of us. But the action is not going to be towards the outside as much as it is going to be within the process of our own dualistic, polarized experience, right? Creative transmutation. So Mars and Jupiter together, right? I mean, you got the leader and you got the warrior together at this degree of Aries. So they're making their battle plan, right? They are feeling it out, what they are going to do, how they are going to act, how they're going to expand and move forward based on their relationship with the world outside, but very much an insular moment. And we're coming into, the moon comes into Gemini, 0 degrees Gemini, so it's crossing the Pleiades. It has this conjunction, and then on the 30th, we have the new moon. So there will be plenty of time to be talking about these later transits. But you can see for yourself how much of an action-packed week this truly is. So, take care of yourself, right? Take care of yourself. Realize that not everything is going to have a rational answer. I have to keep telling myself that, but this is exactly how you fine-tune your own discernment and your own intuition and your gut check, right? Because without those things, if you're relying strictly on your mind, and I'm telling you, with the moon or the sun coming into Gemini season, it's going to be very difficult not to identify with this realm, okay? So we want to make sure that we are not totally pushing away our holistic or intuitive aspect of things, and only in favor of the identification with the world of ideas and communication in the mind. And it's great, right? The sun coming into Gemini does represent the sprout reaching up towards the light. It busts through the soil, right? It's finally like, oh, I'm here. And now all I have to go is up and experience the interaction with the light, okay? And that's a great experience. But we're going to come into retrograde season soon, and so we definitely want to be tapped into our intuition and to let these processes purge out of us so that we are truly ready to enter a new dimension of existence and being, and not getting pulled back in, right? Recycled right back into the same old shit. And believe me, that playbook is still that's all I got, right? When you are not going to make the transition and you know it, or you subconsciously know it, whatever it is, I mean, all you have is the old system of doing things, and that is not our future. So the problem is that the mind doesn't necessarily have the capacity to be able to conceptualize these things. It comes from something else. It comes from that spark of divinity within. It comes through our own instinct and intuition. And then the consciousness starts to, be able to access it. And this Kazemi, I think, is going to be that moment where we at least get to see within ourselves, identify the full range. You get to see the whole ocean at that glass bottom boat, right? Everything that is available to us is going to be available to our own inner eye, right? Turn the third eye inward and allow that to sharpen your inner vision, right? Because we're going to need it moving forward, especially as Mercury continues its retrograde. So also you can see that it is in conjunction with Algol leading up to the next new moon. It's going to station direct right around the new moon. So we also know that as we come into this new moon period, the mind itself is going to experience now this decapitation in some ways, maybe not literally, I hope not, geez, that's awful, but more of a releasing, right? Releasing that which was meant to be released fully with the full moon had it not been eclipsed. And Mercury is going to at least allow us to conceptualize now what it is that we have been attempting to release since the last lunar eclipse that happened in November of 2021. So I'm going to leave it there, my friends. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. I want to remind you again, because I just did one of these readings yesterday for somebody, this cultivation reading. I always pull up the wrong one, is the eclipse season forecast, May to November. There is so much material to cover for everybody during this time. So we look at your natal chart, your secondary progressions, your starseed markings, and how they are all factored into this 6-month cycle and what to expect in what areas. So we are cultivating something, right? We're cultivating the growth of our own consciousness, our own individual consciousness, that which is meant to nourish and sustain us. But we do have to give ourselves a wide berth and realize that we are now in we've stepped. We've gone through the jetway, we've gone on the plane, we are on our way now. It is happening. And by the time we get to the new moon, that craft, whatever that craft is that we're in, is going to take a nosedive to some sort of location. And we'll get to that, right? We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But in the meantime, if you really want to get a sense of the next 6 months for you and what, some important benchmarks of focus, this is a great way to do it. So I'm still offering this sale reading up until the end of the month. So you can go to catalystenergies.net and book that if you're looking for something more in a different budget, right, or a different financial bracket, I'm doing lunar transit forecasts. This is a great way to find out how this new moon is going to impact you personally in your natal chart, your starseed markings. So 30-minute is recording, or 60-minute recording. We would look at the new moon, the whole cycle of the new moon in Gemini. There's going to be a full moon at the galactic center in Sagittarius, 24 degrees, 25 degrees, pretty close. And so this is a great way to do it. Also, you can book from catalystenergies.net. That's linked in the description box below. And we have a solstice coming soon as well. So, my friends, thank you for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Please take care of yourself. Please reach out if you need any support. If you have any questions, my email is in the description box below. Join us on Telegram. And certainly consider joining us for the Catalyst Classroom next week for this new moon in Gemini that we're going to be talking about Aldebaran, the Hyades Starseed, Archangel Michael, because it's related to Aldebaran. And of course, the Starseed Fellowship, where we all just get together on Zoom and really just kind of share what's going on and find that common ground and weave our threads together in order to create a completely new, upgraded, fifth density version of the collective consciousness. So it's one conversation, one interaction at a time. So love you guys. Have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. Enjoy the Mercury Sun Cazimi. And I will see you on Monday for the Starseed Ministry. Take care of yourself.